Now, some of the perspectives that are shared in this paper might be very contentious. You might think it's outlandish, but I think it's also vetted by the fact that it's very well sort of researched. It hasn't been peer reviewed yet, but I think it sort of almost sensitizes us to the ethical issues around. So I just thought it'll be a nice segue into the AI ethics debate. So without further ado, and I must warn you, there's sort of a lot of information, so don't be too overwhelmed. And, I was just unpacking the concepts as I'm sort of, really engaging with it too. So I will send this PowerPoint to you once I've cleaned it up. But yeah, let's get on with this conversation then. So we thought we'd talk about a critical conversation about ChatGPT, but and other AI tools that are, the currency of mode right now with research students and so forth. So this is the working paper that I was talking about, the future of AI in education, and the authors recommend 13 things we can do to minimize the damage. So I really sort of want to go through a bit of the paper with you, and then we'll quickly glance at the recommendations and then go on to the usage of these tools in teaching and learning. So, as I said, I'll be talking about the paper and then the ethical concerns, a little bit about learning and teaching, the policies in the South African landscape around the use of these tools. We also look at the notion of academic integrity and plagiarism and why AI detectives are not useful. And then I'm going to share with you some tools that I've picked up from research thought leaders on LinkedIn and so forth. So there's lots of, if my presentation doesn't suit you, I can definitely say that there's lots of resources to share with you at the end of the presentation. Okay. So to kick off, we're going to look at how large language models work, but looking more so specifically at the brain, right? The human brain on which all these models are really modeled on. So the term was used in, sorry, yeah, where's the previous slide now? Okay, that's gone. Okay, so I had the yeah, sorry, I had a previous slide here where I showed the human brain and how the brain is composed of neurons and synapses, and how the large language models in this slide here, you can see that they model on the similar architecture of the brain, right? So the brain was the model of the brain was the mathematical model of the brain was conceived, I think, around about 1950. So we produce this mathematical model, and it's that particular mathematical model that now drives AI systems. So it's replicated on of course, the neural networks. Deep learning neural networks, you can see, are made of a number of parameters. There's about 175 billion of that, right? And then you have this transformer architecture, and you have things called flexible connections and load weighting. So depending on the stimulus that's presented to the particular model, it can then either apply a weight or not, and it allows words and so forth to pass through. So it handles sequences of data. The flexible connections and the load weightings are similar to the neurons and the dendrites in the brain that are fired off, right, by stimuli. So we can adjust that synapses at various levels for output responses and lower levels for input responses, right? So that reduces the differences between predicting the text that ChatGPT produces and the actual outcome. Now, I know this all sounds like perhaps, too technicist, but I'm sure it'll start making sense to you as we continue. So you see, I've highlighted the word deep learning architecture and the trained on vast amounts of data. And that's essentially what these large models are, right? They trained on huge amounts of data scraped from the internet. And the way you produce the output there is that the queries are broken down into tokens. It reads the tokens and then through probability determines the most important word. So it generates a series of words based on statistical analysis, right? So it's an iterative process and it copies patterns. And hence we say it doesn't reason, it predicts, it returns text that is probabilistically plausible. Okay. So that's a Chat GPT model, but then you can also get other models that are useful for research. And these are smaller, not smaller models, but they train on smaller data sets, on a specific data set. So you can fine tune that model. Now, one of the questions I know that was posed for me to address was, using ChatGPT, the references that are sometimes spewed out, we know that it hallucinates and so forth, and they might not be real references. So this is where you get research tools like Consensus. And this is an AI-powered search engine, but it's limited to its databases. So you're going to get authentic research papers from there. Okay, so as you can see there, it's only sort of looking at 6 topics: economics, social policy, medicine, and mental health. So considering all of this, we know that AI systems are now not dissimilar to human brains, right? So we say that it's likened actually to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, where you have abstract thinking, your computer problem solving skills and so forth at the prefrontal cortex. So it's as I mentioned, it's the mathematical model of the brain that drives the current AI system of computational modeling. And again, ChatGPT models, these large language models, are pre-trained models on internet data. Okay. And then they fine-tune using reinforcement learning from human feedback. So I'm sure most of you know about the debate around Kenyan workers being used to do onerous work, checking this data, cleaning it up, and being paid horrendous pittance for that work. Current capability of AI systems is that it already exceeds the average human in a number of domains. And then we know that it's not plagiarizing content, right? So it's synthesizing content that it's also known as a stochastic model, or the king of pastiche. So it's basically copying and pasting, putting that together, and that's, in a simplistic form. And then the other aspect from this, we know human brains, I think we use 20% of our energies. However, AI systems are huge energy guzzlers, right? They consume a huge amount of energy and they generate a lot of heat. There's obviously, we're now talking about the ecological impact of these AI systems. Let me go into the next slide now. So there's a term called carbon chauvinism by Max Tegmark. And I've put there this article that appeared in Times Magazine, the Don't Look Up Thinking That Could Doom Us with AI. Now, I'm focusing on that is that he basically says to suggest, to adopt a human-centric view that our intelligence, that AI could never catch up with our intelligence or whatever, would actually put us in great danger, because we're then not able to apprehend the possible ramifications of this type of intelligence. And he says such carbon chauvinism ignores a core insight from the AI revolution, that intelligence is all about information processing. And it doesn't matter whether the information is processed by carbon atoms in brains or by silicon atoms in computers. So what is he getting at here? So, we would say, well, we have consciousness, right? I mean, AI doesn't have consciousness. But however, there's a school of thought that says, well, firstly, the notion of consciousness has been a difficult concept that philosophers and neuroscientists have grappled with on a subjective level. Okay, so it's in computational gurus, or rather computer scientists would argue that that you could say consciousness is actually a user illusion. It's just a user interface. So it's a graphical interface, and which overlies lots of complex algorithm work that's happening at the bottom, and there's notions of heuristics derived from cognitive outputs to enable quick decisions. So what we're saying there, that consciousness could actually be equated to some computational process. Now, again, like I said, these are controversial perspectives and by no means definitive, but these are the notions that were shared by the authors of this paper, right? And just yesterday, I read in the New Scientist that currently there's no theoretical barrier for AI to reach self-awareness. We're not yet there, but we could very well reach that in time. Again, the notion of emotions, right? So we'll say, well, AI, artificial intelligence, there's no ways that they could actually exhibit emotions, but the theory is that you could sort of subscribe emotions to actually being electrical signals, right? And and these operate as part again of a computer decision-making process. So we subconsciously we're processing a host of data, and this sends a jolt to our stomach, or our increases our heart rate. We have anxiety, and those type of aspects. So certainly an AI tool could mimic that. But obviously an AI tool now is disembodied. It doesn't have a body as such, right? So just keep that in mind. Goals, humans have agency, right? AI doesn't. Absolutely correct here. But if we say that that agency, which is dependent on, so for example, when you're making the decision, you're searching through options, you're weighing your pros and cons, positives and negatives, and then you decide to pursue a goal. So you develop a plan of action. And that's really just algorithms, right? Because AI systems can be trained to have a recursive feedback system too, because you're deliberating, you then planning your action. And there's the notion that, well, AI could certainly be heading that way too. Creativity, again, another algorithmic process here. Yeah, you're selecting problems. You have a selection of problems. You're identifying various approaches, alternatives. But this is a particular notion of creativity. So I'm going to emphasize that these are the author's notions of these aspects. But to confirm that, there's another slide where I show you that AI has already passed some creativity tests, surpassing humans in creativity. Empathy. So what do we mean by that? Can an AI simulate empathic notions? It could simulate our emotions, the author's content. We already have biometrics. We have personality profiling. So it's not a far-fetched notion. So it could have the illusion of empathy, but again, I'm focusing on illusion, right? And that could be likened to a human sociopath. So these are just kind of notions about why we shouldn't believe that these characteristics that I've discussed here would be just unique or to humans, and hence why we need to really be mindful and vigilant about where we're heading with these tools. Thinking, yes, they don't think like us. We've said that they're similar to the brain, okay, but they certainly think in a different way and at accelerated rates. They obviously don't use neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin. There's no hormones emitting. There's no gland emitting hormones there. There's no physical bodies to give that electric jolt. But yeah, not yet. So the authors basically suggest that our brains might be entirely computational, although embracing our computational nature does not diminish our uniqueness. Instead, it highlights the power and sophistication of the computational processes within us. So that's something positive, right? Let's keep that in mind. But they also say these systems already exceed the average human in a number of domains. And we're seeing those tests. If you follow somebody called Ethan Mollick on LinkedIn, you'll see he's always posting about how these tools are getting more and more sophisticated. And the latest tests, which would reveal that they actually surpassing creativity tests. Of course, the Turing test has been passed. So yeah, we can't just, write them off as being dumb plagiarists. Not at all. Okay, so in terms of the forecast of AI development, as I said, we need to be hyper vigilant, right, about where these tools might be hitting. there's this concept of artificial general intelligence. So this is a notion that a more advanced version of AI, one that can perform tasks better than us at our teaching and advancing its own capabilities, is quite likely to happen sooner rather than what was once predicted. I've posted two images here of there's a Channel 4 series currently on humans, which I've streamed. Really brilliant. It's about synthetic intelligences like this having human features, but interestingly notions of othering, and that comes out as to how we might potentially be. I mean, this is really outlandish, but yeah, I think in the creative fields or so, we already discussing notions of sentient beings in artificial intelligence. As you can see there, I've said most of the experts in the AI field. These are the experts, right? I mean, they sounding the alarm bells on this. People like Gary Marcus, he runs a Responsible AI Institute. We know Jeffrey Hilton has come out. So there's lots of AI experts who are sounding the alarm bells about putting a pause on this development until we have proper regulation in place. However, you'll notice that I talk about disembodied systems here. So that kind of suggests that we know in here having sort of a physical notion of this AI intelligent, like a robot as such, with physical abilities. And that's largely because the authors in this document basically reference the fact that our physical and perceptual abilities evolved over 100 million years, whilst abstract thought and language, as we know, is largely just emerged in the last 200,000 years. So we're going to, we can be thankful that there's still a catch up before we get human life like dolls and robots. Okay. So having said all of that, I mean, you can understand now why these ethical concerns that I think most of you are already aware of about the embedded biases in tools, the privacy concerns, the minute you log onto these tools, you are required to put in your email address, your information. There's already a profile of yours being built. The lack of transparency, built-in surveillance issues. I mentioned the environmental footprint, right? The ecological impact of these tools. We know about deepfakes, disinformation dissemination, other aspects like the geopolitical competition between that these tools present. So these are huge ethical concerns and risks that we need to be mindful of. And then again, as I mentioned, and I think that was the crux of the beginning of this, about AI reaching its peak performance. Is it almost there yet? And these were the two tests that were just recently published. So AI outperforms humans in creativity tests. That's in the neuroscience. And then, GPT-4 beats 91% of humans on the variation of the alternative users test for creativity. Okay, and it also excelled in fluency and originality in the Torrance test of creative thinking. So yeah, lots of concern about this. Joshua Bingo from the Quebec Institute at the University of Montreal has cautioned about this. As I mentioned, Jeffrey Hilton, Gary Marcus, these are all AI experts in the field who are cautioning. Gary Marcus says, yes, we're not necessarily looking at our human extinction, but yeah, there is a probability of catastrophe, not the probability of doom, but certainly of catastrophe if we don't put a halt on these development or pause or ensure that there's regulations around this. Okay, but what does this mean for teaching and learning? So previously, as we know, in previous technological disruptive eras or so, whenever there was a new technology, of course, you'd have the Cassandras, the Luddites kind of, revolting at that, about that because of the potential economic loss or labor loss, just being displaced. And then you have the enthusiasts who always would suggest that, yes, with each new technological solution, you have a better quality of life, economic upliftment. But I wonder, the authors contend they're not so sure whether the Cassandra notion is actually should be readily dismissed in this new technological wave of innovation. So to talk about the redundant skills here, let's look about the redundant skills. We did shed redundant skills previously. We had new complex skills emerge, and that's known as the iron law of economics. Sorry, I'm not too conversant on economic theories or so, but it was really interesting the way the authors unpack this. So in terms of farming, we previously had 70% of farming, now that's 2%. Our agricultural output has been exceeded through automation now, that's been a boon. However, look at the skill of mental arithmetic. Since the advent of the calculator, we see a decline in that type of skills. But of course, students are now engaging in higher order problem solving skills, right? Map reading, we all have our GPS. So our human mental maps have taken a decline in that. So coming back now to the AI. So we're saying we focused on disruptive technology waves previously. What about our current wave now? There is a concern that literacy skills may become, as author suggests, quaint as Latin and the classics. Because for expert use, certainly the use of AI can augment, right, our productivity. We know that. We've got the skills. We know how to write. Most of you are PhDs, master students. Certainly we can utilize those skills and optimize our output. But there is a concern, though, about the young ones coming in. And we really need to apply ourselves as to how these tools could help or whether it would be to the detriment. So again, have these authors just lost the plot or not? I don't think so. You'll see that they make quite considered recommendations there. If we have the necessary guardrails on AI, perhaps lockouts that prevent students from using the systems for cheating, apps for fact checking, that could be something that could assist. It could also, and this is a use that's been touted widely on LinkedIn for teacher workloads, right? So teachers could use this technology to assist in mundane tasks, and then free them up to engage in more creative and helpful teaching methods. The other aspect is as personal digital tutors for all children. So Khan Academy has already come out with a coach, Khan Amigo. And this basically kind of customizes the learning pathway for each student. Okay. It could also help school university leadership teams with their improvement planning. So these are great implications if, however, we have the necessary guardrails. And what are those necessary guardrails? And I'm really not going to labor too much on this, but really essentially from here, we need a global regulatory framework. AI companies should go through appropriate licensing process. The authors make a strong argument for making it illegal to impersonate humans. Point number 5, I don't know how we're going to do that, but students, particularly children, should not have unfettered access to these systems before you have risk-based assessments. So I think you'd agree with me that these are reasonable and sound recommendations. But yeah, just something to think around how we, and I do wonder because this technology has now been made open, so you have people just sort of going about using the energy the machine that drives these technologies and using it for whatever means, and that is a concern, right? We've democratized, we've made it open access, but was it a bit too premature? And yeah, I think the crux is this, that you just keep in mind that we should work on the assumption that we're only 2 years away from AGI. and that's artificial general intelligence, that might be capable of undertaking all complex human tasks to a higher standard than we could ever do, and at a fraction of a cost. So this is huge labor implications, right? I mean, a future of work. But we know that we're in a new era. And as educators currently, I mean, I have a crisis of faith. I was thinking, should we be endorsing these tools? We have to endorse it. We have to equip our students for the workplace. How, you know, and these are the, I mean, this is where it started. It's a new era. It's a completely new era now of hybrid learning. And the skills there would be critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, leadership, digital literacy. Okay. Just something to reflect on how these might then start featuring into our assessments. I think there's going to be a strong need for educators, for learners to engage in or something called authentic assessments. So we're already moving away from the essay as a means of assessing. Okay, this is obviously not being put in policy as yet, but as I'll share with you later, there's certainly, if you look at the university policies around the world globally and in the South African landscape, strong move to start assessing differently. It's going to require teachers to sort of invest more thought and effort into creating assessments. But yeah, it's an interesting time. Just saying to focus on Chat GPT metaphors, and I think this gives us a handle on its potential application. So it could be called a conversational partner, question answering machine, an editor, an essay writer. We've heard all those notions, right? But also a blurry JPEG. So sometimes it's not going to end as I've just put links there to those articles there. It does give you perhaps not the most accurate version. A friend, a smart drunk intern. But then again, as a cognitive scaffolding engine, really helpful for learners unpacking complex arguments or so. And then lastly, a broken mirror of us. And I think that's applicable in terms of the creative industries, the images that these tools are creating, which are sometimes really sort of, it's weird. I don't know if you know of the uncanny valley phenomena. That's the revulsion one feels, innate revulsion one feels when you see sort of something that's artificial. You can see that there's something amiss there. And then again, in these DALL-E tools and that when they sort of develop images, depending on the prompts, yeah, there's sometimes things go really awry there. So that was just sort of a nice take on that notion. I mentioned Ethan Mollick. He's come up with various uses of the way we could use AI in class. So as a mentor, providing feedback, as a tutor, and then he gives the pedagogical risk associated with each of those uses. And yeah, it'd be good to reflect on to what extent you'd want to sort of use AI in those roles there and the associated risk. As I mentioned, it's extremely useful tool for rudimentary tasks. Okay, so it's going to free you up. A cognitive scaffolding machine, and always start your prompt. Ask for structure, not prose. And that I think is going to be our key challenge with students. How do we get them to sort of say, if you do this and just, you're going to churn out an answer to a question, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice. I do wonder, though, about the responsibility falling a lot on students then. But yeah, those are things that educators will now have to grapple with. How do you appropriately structure an assessment so that it's really not, a case where a student's going to end, but go in and sort of ask for the answer. But also, how do we start promoting notions of integrity, of sort of going back to where we were once before? Those notions of honesty, integrity, the soft graduate attribute skills. Priming engine as a collaborative partner to brainstorm ideas and provide an initial list of ideas or motivational break, when you're having a sort of writer's break or writer's block, really good tool. But I do also wonder how dependent one might become on that. Is it going to kind of create sort of an inertness in us, And will it generate an imposter syndrome? Like, I'm not as good as what ChatGPT is going to deliver. Those are issues that we have to, that we're going to have to grapple with it. Anyway, certainly for English second language learners, brilliant tool to unpack arguments. You can prime it to say, explain this to me at a simpler level, and complex topics can be broken down that way. And really useful in first drafts and reviews. Okay. Just lifted this from one of the documents there. Some prompts there to improve your writing. Proofread my writing above, fix grammar and spelling mistakes, make suggestions that will improve my writing clarity. Okay, so I know there was a question there, but if you use that, does it mean your document is plagiarized? Grammarly, Quillbot are being used extensively. We can't, students can't be penalized for that. And I'm going to go onto the vehicles or the instruments to assist students in avoiding being penalized on that score. So just a little bit about the prompt. This is from somebody I follow, Jonathan Boymel from New York University on LinkedIn, and proposed a rubber duck analogy. And it's basically he's positing that most of us rather, think much faster than we speak. So talking forces us to slow down, right? So when you speak out loud, as you would when you're typing out, you are forced to articulate your logic and assumptions more clearly. And that's where ChatGPT and these AI models can assist, because when you're prompting, that's also a skill there. You're going to have to break it down into exactly what it is you require, right? So there might be aspects where we'd be assessing those prompts to an assignment. How did you craft those prompts? So, and also thinking out loud, research suggests that it improves cognitive performance. And so the duck doesn't know anything about the problem. You've got to explain it to the duck, and that duck is your ChatGPT, right? So you've got to clarify your problem, identify goals and decision criteria, and then, refine that prompt until you get your appropriate output from there. This is from the severalpublishing.com, the Brent Anderson. He's got amazing videos. You really must follow him on YouTube. And he's come up with a 7-step writing process as to how to use and integrate ChatGPT around that. And you can see to research potential topics and present options. So you could use ChatGPT in choosing a topic, brainstorming, in outlining, in drafting, in soliciting feedback, revising, and proofreading, but obviously not to generate the whole topic there. So yeah, as I said, as I started out with that first slide, it seems like everything's going to be almost not co-authored, but you're going to be co-assisted rather with this tool. There's a AI Bill of Rights for Education. Professor Catherine Conrad from the University of Kansas draws on this. This is draws on the Biden administration's Office of Science and Technology that was released in 2022. So that Bill of Rights talks to safe and effective systems, to algorithmic discrimination protections, that you should not face discrimination by algorithms, and systems should be used and designed in an equitable way, data privacy, and so forth. So they drew from that document, and they've come out, it's more an aspirational sort of charter, a rights for educators. So educators should have input in purchasing and implementing any tools that are used in the institution. Of course, input on policies. Their professional development, educators must be trained on this use, especially on critical AI literacy, autonomy, and protection of legal rights. So too for students, right? And students must be, they should be able to expect clear guidance from their lecturer, from their instructor, on whether and how these tools are being used in any of their work for a course, okay? They should be given guidance on the appropriate tools, whether the tools the specific tools that are appropriate for their assignments. They should be provided with means to consult about the use of these tools, okay, prior to submitting that assignment. So that must be ingrained in a Charter of Rights for students. If there's a risk of data surveillance, a student, that right must be enshrined that they can opt out. So there must be a huge emphasis placed on privacy and creative control. And then, of course, the right to appeal, that those universities should allow for that, make those vehicles available to students. And students need to be notified if they're being assessed through an automated tool. Okay, and the protection of legal rights. You should never be subjected to any automated and/or generative system that impinges on your legal rights. To what extent this will be adopted in our context, I'm not sure. But this is a journal, Critical AI Literacy, and Karen Conrad is a key contributor to that. And for those that are interested in this work, you should actually follow her and the Critical AI Literacy journal. I think their first publication will be out this month. So yeah, that my big wish at Wits is that we actually start developing a critical AI literacy course for use in all students' courses across the board. So South Africa University Policies and Guidelines, Wits University Policy, we don't as such have a dedicated policy to, on the use of how lecturers should be using. There's a formal policy. So there's been approaches to the use of AI in teaching and learning. The approach to this draws on the risks and the use of AI in classrooms. It does make special reference to the fact that where appropriate, a lecturer could use it, and they can choose not to use it, but it must be made clear to the student that that tool is not being allowed to use, not allowed to be used or not. And then, of course, that document draws on the academic misconduct policy, clearly defining what plagiarism is. Now, remember, Chat GPT, that isn't plagiarism, right? So we're going to get to what constitutes plagiarism now, because plagiarism is described as a failure to acknowledge the ideas and writings of others, and when you're copying it verbatim. So Chat GPT doesn't plagiarize. It's creating a synthesis of tools. So how do we, but you have to basically be transparent about your use of that tool. So somewhere in whatever document you submit, you are obliged to say that this was used, not necessarily as a reference there, or cited as an author, but in terms of your methodology. Okay. Again, the Wits framework of academic integrity, we talk about that it talks to fostering an ethos of academic integrity so that there's less need for sanctions for misconduct. So that will be our key challenge now. How do we start promoting notions of academic integrity in various ways? And we're going to have to be creative about that. Then it draws on the new Senate standing orders for the assessment of student learning. And this talks a lot about using authentic assessments. So we're going to have to be creative on how new diverse forms of assessments that will be used. So it encourages students to draw from and reflect on their own experiences. Having said that, though, there is a prompt, right? Initially we thought when ChatGPT first came out, we could use, we could tell students, well, draw on your own experience as a young South African during whatever, during this particular period. And of course, ChatGPT is prompting now. You can ask it to role model a student in that particular era, and then it comes up with that perspective. So a lecturer was in a quandary because one of the students did that and said that their particular area and sort of gave all the finer details around that. And the lecturer was now faced with as to how do they assess them, because certainly creativity and ingenuity is there, but yeah, the lecturer needed to have told the student from the beginning that you can't use it or you can, type of thing. And that's really the point of departure. Other South African university policies, I see UJ talks about the notion of being responsible, informed, transparency, and ethical in their student guide. Okay, so they've got they foreground learning integrity in the use of generative AI tools. Again, this all talks about those aspects that have come from our ethical considerations. And then so Stellenbosch University has just released its guidelines now. I haven't looked at it yet, but there's also the UP guide for ChatGPT usage in teaching and learning, again emphasizing notions of integrity and that you should be informed before you need to research the tool you're using and so forth. So again, lots of the onus on the student to ensure that they research the tool usage, who developed, actually, sorry, that's UJ. UJ makes a strong emphasis on students researching who developed the tool, so who's driving the use of the tool before they use that tool. So it's quite laudable values and notions that are being expressed there. And then other policies, this is a good one here, guidelines for the use of AI in university courses. I see it's being cited by lots of critical AI educators, and I'll put the link on this slide later. But all of these essentially are geared towards promoting AI literacy. Okay. So in terms of academic integrity and plagiarism, this John Nash provides a helpful guide on what constitutes plagiarism versus generative text. And he says it's based on 5 maxims, right? So generative AI in academic work is not necessarily academically dishonest, okay? And then whether AI use constitutes cheating depends entirely on the assignment and intended learning goals set by the teacher. Maxim 3, if the purpose is to demonstrate comprehension, original analysis, or subject mastery, AI-generated responses could undermine academic integrity. So can you see here the use of the AI tools in different contexts, right? If the goal is effective communication, persuasion, or polished writing, AI can help students efficiently create original high-quality work. But again, that maxim there, teachers should provide clear expectations and guidance around appropriate AI use before assignments are given to students. Okay, and yeah, so that's a really helpful post on plagiarism versus generative text. So how to acknowledge AI in academic writing? Don't cite that, you'll see here, UJ's guidelines suggested that in-text reference, author of generative AI model, year, version used, example. This, and I suspect that the UJ's guideline was published probably at the beginning of the year. More recent discourse is suggesting that you don't cite AI as an author, because what are we doing then? We are now anthropomorphizing AI, right? We're seeing it as human, and that's what we want to guard against. So you can say you acknowledge the use of ChatGPT from OpenAI in generating text for the study. And then you can also include the prompts that you used, okay? Essentially, the guiding principle there is the transparency of use. So students are obliged to always, show their usage there. Can AI be an author? And that's really just, again, just endorsing what I said earlier. The World Association of Medical Editors published a set of recommendations stating unequivocally that AI should not be cited as an author because it cannot take responsibility for what it has produced, nor is it a legal entity to which recourse can be taken or copyright assigned. Okay, and so that's really interesting. This the Committee on Publication Ethics has published this. So again, attributing AI use, authors should clearly disclose if they've used any AI language models in their paper in the methodology section of any submission. So for your research, please use that in your methodology section, okay? Again, principle of transparency of use, and don't anthropomorphize AI. These are just little infographics that I thought I'd share with you. AI use in research, the ethical implications, the validity of sources, the inherent bias issues, the plagiarism potential, misinformation risk. These are all the ethical implications that you should be sensitized about. But this is like the real sort of, what's it, Easter eggs. The tools for your literature review project. So we were talking about Chat GPT, but there's a host of tools that one could use. Um, there's Illicit, which I see is being used a lot. It acts like a search engine to give you credible sources for research queries. Okay. You can download it as a desktop app or use it directly from your browser. And it helps with formulating, refining, and identifying research literature. Then there's Research Rabbit. This, I believe, is a really powerful research assistant. So it finds and organizes your research papers for you and your collaborators. So you just enter a keyword and then it opens up a sort of a whole bed of other documents that you might, or rather relevant papers, using Semantic Scholar and or PubMed. Okay. And then there's Consensus, which is also cited as a really good tool. But yeah, I'll be sharing that with you. And then what do you do when you're accused of AI? This was an article that appeared. So obviously it's a key issue now because this is rearing its head. You know, we can't detect human text. We're getting false positive AI detectors. Don't you? Sorry, this was the wrong slide. I should actually go to this one first. Why AI detection is not useful. AI detectors can be outwitted by more sophisticated AI text generators. We've just turned it in off at Wits because we realize that it's giving us false positives. We can't really at this point say which is human generated text and AI text. It's not giving us that. Some people lament the turning it in because it's also a way to sort of assist students. If you're not going to use it for punitive measures, you know, you could engage with your student and talk about the assignment there. But yeah, it's not useful in terms of, you know, assessing whether students committed plagiarism or not. Again, there's talk about digital watermarks, but this also may not be reliable. One of the blog posts I heard about originality.ai that you could use this, but I'm not so sure about that anymore. There's a Chrome extension which some lecturers are using, and then they can see the students' recent changes on their document. So they can see sort of how you've been, you know, working on your document, and that could possibly give a way to ensure that it's not a, you know, it hasn't, you haven't solely relied on AI. And then this is just a little bit about the 10 types of plagiarism that you can get. Okay, just so this will be useful for students. And here's a practical guide to boost research productivity with Chat GPT. So this is by Razia Aliani. She's on LinkedIn. Do follow her. You know, she really shares a host of really helpful documents. There's Razia, there's I think, Iranian guy called Azad. No, wait, he also shares lots of useful uh, information and research practices. And then, yeah, I just sort of thought I'd share with you some reference tools and plugins that you could use. And I think that's my true, yeah, as I explained to you, there's lots of the references are all here in this presentation, resources, AI policies, and the AI in education thought leaders in terms of writing. Anna Smith, Lance Eaton, Mahabali, key thought leaders you need to follow on using AI in writing. I think they come with a critical gaze, very concerned about perhaps, you know, students being losing the skill of writing, but how can we enhance and ensure and augment that skill with AI tools? And of course, Ethan Mollick is a tech enthusiast, AI enthusiast of note. And as I mentioned, Brett and Anders and George Valenciano's often, you know, he sort of gives a very, again, a critical gaze on the tool. And Sarah Eaton focuses on plagiarism issues and academic integrity. Laura Duman, another key person to follow in terms of AI ethics. And that's all on my presentation. I know it was a lot of information. Jillian, you asking their question. My concern is how AI access and use may exacerbate and entrench inequalities. Excellent question. I think there is a concern that some of the tools, the more sophisticated tools, of course, require a payment for that. We're having a conference next week at Wits, and I'm hosting a panel with students. And when I asked them about their concerns, of course, access, data, that is a concern. Privileged students who have access to data will obviously be at an advantage with using these tools. So how do we ensure, that's something that we're going to have to also factor when we're doing assessments that could only use the free version of these tools if it's required in assessment. Any other questions?
I have a question. Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Hannah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just got some new headphones, so I wasn't sure if they were working. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. I feel like I have more questions than I had at the start, but thank you so much for that presentation. It really, I think, outlined, I think for me, it really brought up the philosophical and ethical questions that are much broader than the specific questions that I brought with me. And as people interested in social justice and how interrelated all of this AI is with systems that, well, with I guess capitalism that is about profit and is so implicated in inequality, systems of inequality, and with all of the concerns around putting things on pause, are we then implicated if we continue to use it? Sorry, I'm not expressing myself very clearly. It's been a long day, but
No, I hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
if the horse is bolted, but then we continue to use it, knowing, I guess knowing how much it is intertwined with a system that promotes inequality, how do we, what do we do?
Absolutely. And I think you echo my struggle. I mean, I have a crisis of faith here because it's exactly what I had asked, my colleagues. I said, you are endorsing these tools here. But yeah, I think that the development, as I said, is a responsible use of AI, right? So the people that are calling for a pause on the development are not necessarily saying that these tools are bad in and of itself, the way they're currently being used, but the potential for it to really get out of hand, and yes, we subject to market forces. If we don't equip our students, what are they going to be left without these skills? It's such a contentious issue. Because I was having this debate with a colleague of mine, and he said, "Yeah, well, so you're not going to teach students these skills, and what happens to them in the workplace? And the workplace is demanding this, right? And the ramifications that comes with that afterwards. And that's why I think it's so critical that students engage in a critical AI literacy course, because I think these tools are this whole scenario is unfolding at a rapid rate. They can't even properly formulate a policy because there's new developments all the time. A couple of months ago, we thought Turnitin could detect this. It can't detect that anymore. Should we be sort of telling students, well, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice if you cheat? Somebody mentioned to me, but Fatima, before Turnitin, what did we have? What did we rely on? People cheated then. Is that the issue? I said, well, is a concern, and I guess, and where that was coming from, have we placed too much on assessment? Should the focus rather not be on learning and teaching? You know, and I guess that's our real challenge. How do we make learning and teaching so invigorating that a student wouldn't want to cheat at the end of the day, that they're so inspired or so enthused about the subject? Very challenging time for educators, I think. Because remember, what you're talking about, Hannah, is also the instrumentalism of education, right? So are you just sort of passing to ensure employment? So do you just want to get through that assessment so you can get that degree and get out there and get a job type of thing? And again, yeah, neoliberalism, those are the issues that plague us currently. So yeah, I think we're going to have to reconsider a host of issues. I don't have the answers, Hannah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it maybe this just really highlighted to me that we need to think about social justice differently now because of how rapidly this is all taking place, and that it means something different now than maybe it did a few years ago even.
Sure.
But thank you for helping us to grapple with some of these questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
Just unmute yourself
Thanks.
if you would like to ask
Thanks,
a
Bussy.
question.
So if I could just respond to Duane, in my view, AI might not necessarily plagiarize, but students who simply use it verbatim are at risk of plagiarizing. Sure. So I guess, I mean, it's really just debating the term about plagiarizing, right? If they're using it for the wrong intent. So I had a discussion the other day with somebody who said, but for English for second language learners, if they submit an assignment, this is a lecturer, a professor, in fact, he says he has no problem with the student submitting the assignment through using AI, Chat GPT, because if it's enabling them to articulate, as a particular second language learner, more effectively than somebody who's grown up with English as a first language learner, how would you then why would you want to institute punitive measures if the student is certainly, depending on their prompt, that you can see that they're trying to grapple with that particular topic. And again, yeah, I mean, contentious. It's again, should we now be putting a lower mark on summative assessment? This has already moved to that 60 to 40%, 40% on summative assessments, 60% on formative. So you're really trying to nurture that student. You're really trying to engage. You're really trying to immerse yourself in deep engagement in learning. Yeah, in that learning relationship with students. So I have a question about using AI for transcription and ethics, privacy of the participants in research if an AI is transcribing. What are your thoughts? So, currently on Microsoft Teams, we have Read AI, and it's transcribing our meetings, generating minutes for us. Everyone just sort of opts in and it does it. And it's almost become like a non-issue, right? But I'm hearing you. Of course, there's ethics and privacy concerns there. And again, it's the god of efficiency and, kind of reigns there, right? To say, well, we're getting this, we're able to be more productive. But yeah, again, Hannah, at what cost? Those are the ethical concerns that we need to grapple with. So I don't have the answer to that. I think, we people have to kind of, as I mentioned, that Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights for students also says they must have the right to be able to opt out if their data privacy is being infringed on.
Fatima, I have a question. In contexts like South Africa, of which there are many, where you've got such huge divides between who has access to who and who hasn't got access to resources. I mean, if you're thinking of kids, still falling into pit toilets and not having classrooms, or and then other kids or on the other extreme, AI is just galloping off into some unknown territory. How ever do we speed the one side up, catch the others? I don't know. That gap just seems to be forever widening.
Yeah. I mean, Jillian, it's that old argument that technology is not neutral, right? Depending on the context there, it could also then serve to kind of widen those gaps and divides. As much as we say that it's democratizing education, it's democratizing access for, perhaps now to these learning models or AI tools, but we're leaving a whole gap behind. these are questions that we must grapple with. Yeah.
I find it deeply depressing, I have to say.
So I wonder, I think that if I look at speakers from the north, and they will be talking, and I wonder if our context is so different that we need to take a different take on this. But I suppose government would argue, well, I mean, we've got real valid, as you say, latrines, toilets. We don't have proper toilets. But we'd say, yeah, there's access. There's been a big move, digital move to equipping schools with data, with devices. Certainly at universities, we make sure that students must have access. I think we were sensitized to that during COVID. But again, the university is a privileged class here, right? What about all the other students or scholars at schools? I'd like to see how that debate unfolds. And I really don't have the answers for that. This is not even an issue when I listen to people on the web, in the UK, that's not an issue. Data is not an issue. They're grappling with about academic integrity. And that's the crux of the issue. They're actually looking at it, reducing inequities for minority groups.
I agree with Hannah. Wish we'd never gone here. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Any other responses? Yeah, go ahead, Erin, please do. Just to read that. It's a fascinating point regarding the placing of focus on the enthusiasm to learn. That simple comment has swayed my outlook on AI, actually. My view has always been that learning should be driven by interest and passion and the pursuit of knowledge and skills rather than the pursuit of good grades. It seems AI is actually encouraging this approach. Being an artist, especially a sculptor working in the world of physical objects, I can't ask AI to learn and execute the practical art-making skills I need, thank goodness, in order to perform my studies. Yet, perhaps the rise of AI and Chat GPT type software could encourage shifting the focus of human power to more practical research aspects, fieldwork, etc. Oh, very interesting, Fatima.
So, Erin, yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up, because this paper that I spoke about, The Future of AI, one of the, when the authors cast their gaze into the future, and they present 4 aspects, which I didn't go into, right? And the one was about when AI automates all these tasks, what is left for humans to do? And they suggest a universal basic income, right? That we work towards it. And I thought, hey, yay, that's great. Would that free us up to pursue the higher arts, the creative arts? Of course, when I mentioned this on LinkedIn, I was shut down, of course. People probably think I walk around with a silver cap or whatever. But anyway, I do wonder about that. Will it free us up? And that's, I suppose, somebody who's also kind of thinking about AI tools and enthusiasts would say, yeah. But again, you're talking about, so for you, it would, as a creative art, you have access. Again, as Jolene pointed out, what does that mean on an equitable basis for people that don't? Do we leave them behind again? Or we could say, well, I mean, especially around, say, the ecological impact. That was my big concern. These are huge energy guzzlers, these AI tools, right? These servers. They consume a huge amount of water to sustain it. Are we killing the climate? And I suppose the objection to that, or the counter argument to that was, well, AI tools could perhaps assist us in providing solutions for those, depending on how it's used. So it's a kind of a watch the space moment. I don't know.
I'm just watching the time, talking of watching things, and I'm aware that we are running a little bit.
But yeah. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be a Cassandra. Really, that is not. You see, Julian, this is what I was concerned about. I think we have to cast a critical gaze, but at the same time, we need to equip ourselves to use these tools responsibly. So it's really, I think, a moment here for creativity, and we're only limited by our imagination, right? And I think also our humanity that we must always uphold. Or rather, we're limited by our lack of imagination and our lack of, we've got our humanity there to spur us on, I think, to generate more creative use or to navigate these waters more responsibly, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if humanity is a stable value, or whether, how AI will influence values, will influence our humanity, our connectedness, all of that. It's I think it's very, I think what I also find scary about is how much shifting sand there is in terms of, what's more permanent and what's not. Our values permanent, even putting the responsibility of ethics and declaring use of Chat GPT or other AI tools onto students or onto teachers, implies that is a value already internalized. Our values not, that's another whole debate, but how values formed, how values created, how they passed on. Fatima, I would like to thank you very much, and to also thank everyone who is, interested in this area and willing to look at it. But Fatima, thank you particularly for all your thought and sharing these incredible resources way beyond what I had thought of, or I think any of us had thought of, about sort of parameters of discussion. You've been very generous. And on a more positive note, AI hasn't overtaken your kindness, your humanity. Very encouraging. So
thanks, Julian.
Thank you.
I just wish I could get Zoom to work, though. That would help for starters. I'm so sorry about not being able to show my face. I promise I'm not lost there in the grass. There is a face here. There's just the camera's not working today. But thank you all for your kindness, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to engage and really, consider and distill these arguments. It's been a very valuable opportunity for me.
You've opened lots of doors and thinking for us. So thank you. And just to everybody here, I think, Fatima, you did say that you would be even more generous and share the slides with us.
Yes, I will, definitely. Let me just clean it up, because there was a whole lots of garbled notes there. I just want to clean up those notes, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, fantastic. So if you registered, which obviously you are, to get in here, then we will share that resource with you.